To order this meeting of the Middleton Finance and Personnel Committee for Tuesday, September 3rd. Bill, would you please do the roll call?
Nairo,
Here.
Lorman,
Sure.
and Jackson is anticipated but not currently present.
Okay, thank you. First item of business is approval of the minutes of our August 20th, 2024 Finance and Personnel Committee meeting. I had one suggestion. It's not a correction necessarily, but just to clarify on page 4 regarding ARPA and the urban forestry grant. When I asked staff to bring us an estimate of what it would take to complete the work, it wasn't just the pruning, it was the recovery from the storms that we had had. So I don't think it warrants a correction to the minutes. But what prompted me to ask for something was just knowing we have a lot of trees that were downed, and so I wouldn't want the staff to limit it to an estimate of the pruning costs, like the normal pruning that we would do. That's the only comment I had. Alder Lorman, did you have any comments on the minutes?
I do not.
Okay. All right, then with that clarification, the minutes of our August 20th, 2024 Finance and Personnel Committee meeting are accepted as drafted. I'm going to ask for an audit of the bills, and then we're going to rearrange the agenda a little bit. Bill, do you have any updates for us?
I do have 3 additions for items that came in late. One is for Alad Tech LLC, $2,573. That's for an EMS software. And then 2 items for the library, Midwest Tape, $10,620.10. Environmental Control, $4,249.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the audit of the bills with the addition of the 3 items, 1 for EMS software and 2 for library related items?
I'm going to make that motion.
All right, and I will second it. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the audit of the bills with the addition of 3 items, 1 for EMS software and 2 for library related items, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Right, the ayes have it. Now, we're going to bump the consideration of health insurance plan proposals up in the agenda because our speaker has another presentation to give somewhere else. So, Mr. Yeager?
Correct.
Yes, go ahead and you can take the podium. And we'll start with our miscellaneous item number 1.
I'm sure this is. It is.
Thank you. Good evening. So for the sake of the summary, as an independent advisor, been working with the city since roughly 2007. And when you look at the history in the background, up until that point, the city was working with the state plan. And from a history standpoint, until that wasn't the best offering, that was when we had transitioned to work with it, who was Unity now Quartz, aligned with the UW system. And as we go through the background, what you'll see is we were with Quartz through 2021. And at that point in time, working through the options, Quartz became less competitive. The UW system was seeking some, I'll call it price correction. And it was then that we had transitioned to Dean, along with many other area public employers, I might add. And a lot of what was attractive at the time for many of the area employers included their not only pricing, but also their narratives on prevention and engagement in primary care. And as we've gone through that transition for the last 3 years, and we're running out on our rate caps with the health plan with Dean, we're now at a point where what we're seeing in the marketplace, we're experiencing higher loss ratio. We're also experiencing fewer individuals getting in for primary care. We're seeing some larger claimants. And as a result, it was time to take a look at what our next options were, which takes us to the next slide of we had gone out to market. When we go out to market, a level playing field, looking at the options. And in the end, our geography, which many of you probably have recognized, main players that can be competitive are the HMOs, the nationals, even the state plan ETF. When I say state plan, I don't know if everyone knows what I'm referring to, the local plan, the state plan. But, after back-to-back years of having around 15% increases with the state plan, they're now right now not having much success being competitive. And the two main players you're ultimately seeing are GHC and Dean that were competitive. And that's the further slides will speak to that comparison. And when we had conversation and when we are comparing with the administration, the main areas of looking at in health plan that are standard, looking at managing the plans include, all right, how are they doing in managing population health, happier, healthier workforce? How are they doing in that regard? The provider options, what is it within provider disruption? What are the options? What's the access like? The other levers are contribution, all right, what's the premium contribution? And then lastly, what's the plan design? How does that align with all of the categories? So the next slides will speak to, when we look at the comparison, some of the initial notes, kind of looking at, okay, what are some of the favorable of each versus the other? Now with the SSM Dean, of course, if we maintained with that one, looking at it, be the same providers as the last 3 years in terms of the network. Meeting with their leadership. So we met at the Dean West Clinic, talked through and try to get a sense of, okay, how's access? How are you going to improve? We're having some challenges in terms of turnaround, and how's that looking? And they gave some assurance that we will see improvement because that's been a bit of an issue. Some of their wellness engagement for prevention seemed, more on the health plan side than necessarily the provider specific side. And right now, we don't have an option. One of the discussion was, could we potentially tap into the school district's clinic? Because the school districts align with SSM and Dean. They had just set up a clinic model that would help some of the main access issues that we had. And at this point in time, that is not an option to tap into specifically the school district clinic based on their capacity, as well as it being new. And if we were to try doing something like that ourselves, that just wouldn't be, it would be cost prohibitive based on our size. Meanwhile, looking at the GHC option, it would be aligned with not only the GHC providers, but specifically the Dane County area, the referral care goes to the UW, the primary care is access to the UW, provided a link with all the specific network. And again, remember prior to 3 years ago, that's who the staff in large part had been aligned with, was the UW system. The other piece that's unique is GHC provides a plan design in the comparison that provides 100% coverage in large part for a lot of the preventative measures. So majority of the claims you see, primary care, chiropractic, preventative exams, immunization on down the line, even urgent care visits, behavioral health, big piece in trend of opportunity, and the therapies would all be covered at the 100% level. So prevention is when we speak with the two, one of the big proponents of GHC's leadership. The next slide is a spreadsheet. When we look at this year by year, we take a look at, okay, on the right two columns, the main proposals being compared. You have the GHC in the middle and the Dean 2025 on the right, far right. And when we look at the difference between the two, in large part, that you see in yellow, the primary care and all the different visits. With GHC, those are covered at 100%. And with Dean, that's the deductible and co-insurance. Urgent care, again, 100% GHC. And that would be the $250 copay when you go to emergency room on both Dean and GHC. Meanwhile, prescription, I'll call that a wash in terms of the comparison between those two. And then in terms of rate caps, GHC is given a second year and a third year rate cap, not to exceed 7.9%. If we achieve a high level of preventative exams, we would even get that down 1 additional percent, whereas Dean gave a second year cap of 11.9%. And when we look at it from a total budgetary standpoint, both are within that 7 to 8% range in terms of what it would be for an increase from the city. In part, it's because even while GHC is more on the premium, we'd be spending a lot less on our health reimbursement arrangement, which we reimburse up to $750 on a single and $1,500 on a family present day. And when majority of the claims would be covered at 100% with GHC, the amount we would spend on that would decrease substantially. The next slide speaks to what's the impact to the contribution? So that was one of the levers. What's the impact to the staff members' contribution? And the far to right column speak to employee only on the first and then family on the second level. And we have individuals on both an HMO plan and a point of service plan present day. And when you look on the far right with Dean, you see how it's $86 a month on a single HMO, $216 on the family. We do have 10 individuals on point of service, and we see they spend $136 single and $337 family. With GHC, the rates for those two categories, whether it's in the HMO or whether it's in their point plan, would be the same. A little bit higher than the HMO on Dean, but it would be the same on the point plan. So you see both are at $90 single, $231 family. A little bit of a win on the Dean family HMO, single and family, but a significant win on the point of service or point plans with GHC. So when we look at the evaluation of the plans, side by side, the main thing as we reviewed from a leadership standpoint, the Dean maintains 3 years of providers. It does provide a tweak to get it in that 7-8% range with the prescription and ER that's provides a cap second year of 11.9%. And the providers are speaking and improving in their staffing and service as we're seeing some of that occurring. And the wellness initiatives, again, not directly necessarily with the providers, but more so with the health plan. And again, on the GHC side, having that no out of pocket for a majority of the claims is a big deal. It really eliminates obstacles for staff seeing providers. And you see the rates being the same. And that's the part where I mentioned lowering the health reimbursement arrangement. It would be a disruption than with the last 3 years we had, but it would be more of an alignment for what staff had prior to that. And that alignment would be not only with the UW more so, but also with GHC. And it would be an expansion on things like behavioral health, dermatology at these no-cost clinics. And those are big deals, and some of the feedback we've been getting from staff in the last 3 years categorically in terms of access. And again, there's some additional stability for the next 2 years. And as I mentioned with the state plan, the local plan had such a long history of being stable rate-wise. Stability is, no longer an automatic. It's not something you can assume, and not just with the ETF, but all. And the biggest thing when we look at this is if we can promote prevention, it will help our chances to have more stability moving forward, just because catching some things early and often certainly helps stability. The next slide speaks to the PPO option. With the GHC, there are some, specific questions. Okay, what is that? Where is that? And what you'll see is it's provided to staff members outside a specific footprint of the noted 8 counties or immediate counties. If you lie outside of those counties, you do have an option. We have 10 staff that would qualify that we noted. They'd be able to access either option. It matches the plan design, it matches the rates, and as a result, it creates some additional freedom of choice to those individuals. And then lastly, what's next? as you see, we're having, the meeting today. The idea would be to provide additional staff education on the specifics of the comparison with an understanding October 1st being the city council meeting from a decision standpoint. And then we'd have the month of October to educate the staff enrolling in November for a January 1st effective date. And I apologize if I went quickly, but I wanted to hit the highlights and field any questions you have from there.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Members, do you have any questions about what we just heard or what you read?
There, Brian W. Are we on, staff's sentiment about changes in this space?
No one is ever happy about provider disruption, but I will say that in the last 3 years, I have fielded nothing but negative comments about our experience with Dean. The initial transition from UW courts to Dean did not go smoothly as they promised. Provider availability has been weeks to over a month for primary care physician visits. Myself, I waited 1.5 years for my first dermatology appointment. So staff is largely ready for a change, at least those that have responded. And we asked earlier in the year, hey, what has your experience been? Because I had gotten some unfiltered and unsolicited complaints. And universally, no one said we're happy with the experience we've had with Dean. We asked just again, Brian sent out a memo to all staff and we received, no, we don't want you to leave yet, but we immediately received this has been the worst healthcare I've ever had in my 20-year municipal career from a department head. So
Yeah, I mean.
not a great experience.
Yeah, well, thanks, because that's generally what I have no data in front of me to back it up, but outside the city staff, that I've heard the same experiences with these local providers. So
I've been a subscriber under both systems. And I will say my personal opinion is the care model is incredibly superior under GHC.
thank you.
Do you have any questions? Any further ones, Steve? Because I have some, but I'll let you go.
No, I mean, that was it. I just wonder where the staff's at. Where,
Yeah, can I
Go
just
ahead.
want to make a brief comment
Go ahead,
if that's okay. I did want to say that I think the timing of when we made the switch to Dean was certainly not ideal with the pandemic. And I think all of the providers, as Al has heard from other clients that he works with, all providers had disruption and access to care issues. However, it seems like we've had several examples, as Brian indicated, with Dean, where there were perhaps greater than normal challenges that we had with Dean. And as we're looking at the options, with that slide with the spreadsheet, as you saw, the bottom line cost is very close between the two. So this is not something being driven just by dollar savings, but looking at the care model, GHC seems to have a focus on primary care, access to care, and removing barriers to coverage with their no deductible cost for many of those services. So that's one of the primary reasons why we're looking at this as an option going forward.
Okay. Yeah, I noted that the GHC appears to be a higher cost for the staff and for us, but it's such a small difference that.
Yeah, the premiums under GHC would be higher than the Dean premiums. We are anticipating that there would be savings in the HRA for the portion that the city covers for deductibles. Hopefully also savings for the employees and the deductibles that they would be paying out of pocket. So we put some estimates in here on the reduced HRA utilization. And based on those estimates, it's very close to a wash on the city costs. We'll know the actual experience if we make the shift, but I would say it's not the bottom line that's driving the decision between the two because they're so close.
Yep. And what assurance do we have from GHC that staff won't encounter the same problems? Because it didn't take me a year to get into see a dermatologist, but that was only because somebody had canceled 2 days after, for an appointment, 2 days after I was calling, and they gave me that appointment. It was going to be 3 months otherwise. And that's UW Health. And I've encountered all kinds of problems having to wait weeks to get in to see my primary care physician. So I don't want the staff to be thinking, oh, it's going to be the way it was prior to the pandemic. I don't want them to be disappointed if they find that UW Health providers are just as swamped as the Dean ones are.
I think that's a fair statement that it, builds to Bill's point. Providers as a whole, not just locally, but nationally, have had a challenge with access from the pandemic. I would say we've seen multiple recent public employers transition to GHC, and based on their model, we've gotten favorable feedback, relatively speaking, when comparing the systems. So to your point, it's not saying it's going to be perfect, but based on the comparison, we've seen one's a more established model than the other.
I guess what I've seen with the GHC is, yes, they will give people quicker access to a single provider, which is nice, which is good, but obviously they are limited. So patients will still all be referred to UW Health for specialty complex. I'm not saying that's bad. That's my employer. So I just, these are the experiences and the things I've seen on my side of the fence. Can only see my primary care provider once a year. Otherwise, I have to see a nurse practitioner or someone else because they're not available. And that's UW Health for me. So if I call today and say I want to see actually my assigned primary care physician, it will not happen. But they will say, we can see you if it's not an emergency, they will say, we can see you in 24 to 48 hours. If you're willing to see a nurse practitioner, if you're willing to see somebody else.
With the UW, yeah.
Yes, with
Yeah.
UW. So,
And I'd say that might be part of the reason, it is part of the reason public employers in the area, you were seeing some shift to GHC, because it would be UW and GHC providers, not just UW providers in primary care category.
yeah.
Brian, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just going to add, Dean has moved to a care team away from primary care providers. So it's unlikely you're going to see a primary care provider unless it's just by chance. And they made that very clear that they moved to a care team. That is far less prevalent with GHC. When you talk about specialties, GHC has embedded a number of specialties into their primary care offerings. So every time you go in to see a primary care physician, whether it's care team or your primary care, they screen for mental health. They screen for physical therapy and other issues. They have integrated chiropractic care. So a number of specialties that are integrated directly into those primary care teams and available inside of GHC without ever having to refer out to UW. A really great integrative care model overall.
I had a question about reproductive health services. I noted that pre and postnatal care is covered. What about abortion care?
That's part of the coverage for both, all the
Both.
above. That's not necessarily unique in either category. I know there's questions sometimes because of the SSM system having maybe opposition at their specific system, but the health plan itself does have providers that would provide. So I look at that and say that's somewhat of a wash between the two.
That's good. And then I noted the 1% is it up to a 1% incentive if? Which
It would be, so whatever the renewal calc comes at, and if it's at the cap, it would decrease by 1% from the cap. But if, for example, we have an exceptional experience year, it could be, and we get a 4% increase, it would decrease to 3% if we had, right now we're having roughly 38 to 40% of our staff getting an annual visit. the ideal number would be closer to 70% or 75%. So, by removing the obstacles of not having out of pocket, no surprises,
Mhm.
because you can have a free preventive visit, but if you talk about all these different things, you get these upcharges. That's not the case with GHC. So we can start really promoting that prevention.
Right. And is there any kind of incentive that the city can provide to get people? I know like you've got Wisconsin, right? You get a $150 gift card if you get your teeth cleaned, fill out a health assessment and one other thing.
Yep, there are gift cards within the GHC plan that we would promote as well to let them know, get the exam, you're not going to get charged, but here's some additional incentive.
Okay. Yeah, I like that idea. Okay, any further questions? And I understand we don't need to take action tonight. This will come before the council in October, our first meeting.
Yep, that's correct. We'd be looking for potential action that evening. Just wanted to introduce it, provide an opportunity for questions, and then over this next month, also have the opportunity for staff to get information and ask questions.
Great. Okay. All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mr. Yeager.
Appreciate the accommodation.
Sure. All right, moving on then to our other business resolutions. We have two. The first one is Resolution 2024-42, amending the 2024 budget for tax increment District Number 3 for the Stone Horse Green project.
Foreman will second that.
Well, you're
sorry.
firsting it.
Firsting it, sorry. I was writing something else down. I'm firsting it, sorry.
So Norman moves.
This is Jackson. I'll second.
Okay, discussion. So I had a question for Abby, and that is just, I get the psyche expense. But I wondered, why do the locks need to be changed?
Good question. We have been experiencing some security problems at Stonehorse Green. The locks currently, they have an indicator to show whether it's vacant or being used. And we've had people from the public using a key to move the indicator, which can manually lock and unlock the door at
From
any
the
time.
outside, they can do that?
Yes, because it's not covered. And it's created a lot of problems. The scheduled timer has not yet been installed. And our construction observation team, which was also the design firm that we used, Psyche, has been working with our facilities person who is no longer employed with the city, as well as our IT director, to come up with the best solution for both resolving the issues with the physical lock that are on the door, as well as getting it scheduled to open and close at a certain time of day. And I think that they have come up with a solution that they think will work, and they think that they can implement it in 2 to 3 weeks, which would be really good because, like I mentioned, we've been having problems. And it's resulted in, coming and finding all of the doors locked or finding the doors unlocked when they're not supposed to be, et cetera. And so I asked Bill to go ahead and prepare the resolution to put on the agenda tonight, even though we don't really have the formalized contract with Psyche Design yet. That's a separate agenda item, but right now it's just in kind of a written quotation format. And then we also don't have any written contract amendment for the 1,121 to modify the locks. But it has caused some problems. We've been working also with the PD on it. And so we would like to try to get the solution implemented quickly if we can. So that's why it's on the agenda tonight.
Okay, and just a question, have we thought about putting security cameras on these doors to be able to catch who's doing this?
We do have the wiring ready to go, but we don't have the cameras. So that would be a separate expense we could bring forward if that's something that you're interested in. I know that they have been going and retrofitting the park shelters to include that. So that's something we could also get best practices from parks on and how that's working for them if you'd like.
Okay, and then also, this seems like a design flaw. There's no option to use a warranty to get some compensation.
I looked at the warranty. I didn't see anything within the language that looked like it would fit. The majority of the cost, though, is actually related to the construction oversight and not the physical
Okay.
locking. We have had to work with Psyche Design quite a bit more than we anticipated because of the delays in the AV equipment, which led to our event coordinator needing assistance when we were setting up events, and getting additional training on AV. And then also there was quite a bit of coordination between our facilities person and IT with our construction oversight company, Psyche. So that's what's leading to a majority of the additional costs.
Thanks. Any further questions for Abby? No?
No question, just thoughts. Maybe not everybody's aware, but enough people hopefully are aware this has been a constant issue. It seems in the city and news and whatnot. I mean, if we do something, can we just make sure it's solid? So
Okay.
whatever is in front of us.
Okay, well, hearing no further questions, all those in favor of approving resolution 2024-42, amending the 2024 budget for tax increment district number 3 for the Stone Horse Green project, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Our second resolution is number 2024-43, amending the 2024 budgets for the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, and capital projects funds. Who would like to move approval of the resolution?
This is Jackson. I'll make approval for the resolution.
Thank you.
Norman will second.
Thanks. Discussion. Do we want to see the table? Or the wording of the? Yeah. So basically the streetlight conversion to LED. And what was the other project?
That was the EV infrastructure build out.
That's what yeah. So those will be moved out. And Bill, you explained that instead of putting the Lake Street project in the list of ARPA projects, because it won't cover all the costs, it'll only cover some, there will be a transfer out of ARPA into the,
Yeah, I think that's the way we'll account for it is we'll treat this as a transfer out from the ARPA fund into the capital projects fund so that we can keep all of the expenses for the projects in one place. So we'll show this as a line on the ARPA as transfer out for this purpose.
okay.
How does this affect, if at all? We were receiving some matching funds for the streetlight conversion project, but we haven't done it. So what's
Yeah.
the impact there?
And that is part of the reason for this recommendation is there is a grant that we've applied for a portion of the street lighting projects. So we don't know the results of that grant yet. And if we're using ARPA for the city share of that project, that needs to all be expended before the end of this year. So by basically swapping and using the ARPA money for the street project and capital money for the EV and the street lighting project, that way we have the flexibility that we carry funds over into next year. If we do find out we get that grant, then we can come back to the committee and the council if there's a request to repurpose a portion of those funds if they're covered by the grant and can be used for something else.
So I was under the impression that we actually had the grant and that's why we were doing this. So we have the grant for the streetlights.
correct.
Kelly's on.
Oh, okay.
Hi, we do have a grant for 2024 for streetlights, which we're working through. And the ARPA funds that are in this resolution were for an additional project of streetlights. And for that, I wrote a grant for 158,000. And we will find out if we get that grant in September, this September sometime. But that would be for 2025. So that streetlight project would end up happening in 2025 either way. But hopefully we'll get that grant to cover most of the costs. There's still a matching amount for that grant if we were to get the $158,000. The city would still need to match with $31,600, but that is definitely within the allocated grant match budget, which we already hold in capital funds.
Okay, so first grant we've done that piece of the project, now a second grant, and okay.
Great. Thanks, Kelly.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving resolution 2024-43, amending the 2024 budgets for the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, and capital projects funds signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. All right, moving on to agreements and contracts. We have 4. The first one is General Services Agreement with Adaptive Restoration LLC, and this comes to us from the Water Commission. Get a motion to approve the agreement.
Sure, Lauren will make a motion that we approve the general service agreement for Adaptive Restoration LLC.
This is Jackson. I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion. Kylie, I have a couple questions. So this agreement, let me find the pages that I'm going to refer to. I think this is a great idea, totally supportive, but I had some questions. So on page 12 of the packet, it says, paragraph number 3, pre-qualify with the city engineer. And my question is, why not pre-qualify with the forester or someone else who is qualified in environmental restoration and management, since that's what the purpose of this general services agreement is? So in other words, adaptive management.
Yeah, this was this is kind of our standard language, and I tried to add in the city engineer and Parks and Rec director, and then in all of the sections, so we could definitely add in that to that section, the city engineer and Parks and Recreation director. That'll be kind of under all of those agreements have under the department head's leadership. So I think that's how they're typically written. So I must have missed that line there.
Okay.
So we could.
It seems to me for the purpose of environmental restoration and management consulting services, Sean, no offense to you, but it seems like it should be somebody with that background specifically to do the pre-qualifying, not even have it be a parks director or forester and city engineer.
Yeah, and I think the other part to consider is that some of the work that they would be doing likely will be for the stormwater utility manager and not through Parks and Rec. But if we listed both, then it could be an or. Whoever's running that particular project can make that particular decision. It's not widely exercised anyway. We tend to work only with consultants that have good people.
Yeah. Attorney Fleming, how do we just add language to this?
Approved to, well, how many paragraphs we're talking about here? Are we talking just in the 3?
I mean, typically in our department, it's going to be myself or our assistant director.
Yep.
So either one of us. And then I think it's Sean or Eric Sorensen, so assistant director, but that link.
You could just generally motion to approve subject to editing and having the appropriate official review pre-qualifications. I don't know if you want to have
Well, let's see if
final
they're,
approval from me to be sure that's been done, or
okay. We'll keep going in case there are other changes, and then we'll make that substitute motion. I noted on page 13, there's a reference to his/her, which is kind of becoming outdated language. So I'm not going to say we can't approve it with this language in here, but I think in the future references to his or her should be there. Pages 17 and 18. There are two, all notices to be given shall be in writing and signed by the person serving the notice. Do we need to have, I mean, I get the shared responsibilities for this, but it seems like a bit of a burden to put on our consultant to have to prepare two written things to send, one to Public Works and one to Parks and Rec. I would think maybe giving it to Parks would be appropriate.
I don't know what, depending on the work, like task orders and stuff like that, you kind of want to do the.
Yeah, I think in practice, this would go to the project manager, which might be neither of these people, but we're a small enough outfit that, you know, when the project manager is in the Public Works Department, they just keep me apprised of that. I suspect it works pretty well the same in Parks and Rec. You know, so that consultants aren't going to Kylie if really they're working closely with Kevin. Or conversely, if they're working with Eric closely, they wouldn't necessarily go to me. They would go to him and he would just tell me. So I don't know. There might be a better way to phrase this, but it was intended as an or kind of thing, like whichever office is running a particular task order for a specific project, get in touch with that department, not both.
Okay. I'm not sure how to phrase that since we won't know who the project manager is. So, Attorney Fleming, the notices that we're talking about in this paragraph, that wouldn't include invoices, would it?
No, well, I mean, typically those notice provisions are when you're exercising
Mm.
something under the contract, like a notice of default, notices of termination, not just ordinary communication, you know, surrounding the project. So I mean, notice under that paragraph should hopefully be an exceedingly rare thing to begin with.
Okay.
Um,
Are there typically two names listed for one party?
not usually, no.
Brian, do you have any thoughts on this? Should it be you? If it's that type of notice?
Yeah, if it's that type of like notice of claim or something like that, typically other agreements we've had have been to the attention of the city administrator. And I can forward it to whomever it's most appropriate to.
Yeah, I suspect our template just had me written in, and we're recognizing this particular firm will likely work for more than one department.
I don't know if that's on. You're very soft.
Wow, so
Then you're very soft.
Unusually soft-spoken tonight. Take the win.
Okay. All right. So that's a change. And then finally, the last thing I had is on page 21. It's the rates for 2024. And maybe I'm missing it, but I didn't see a cost for tree planting.
They don't.
I saw- I
They
saw
don't ta-
for tree felling and felling or removal, and for planting.
We haven't worked with Adaptive on any tree planting projects. So, and typically with tree planting, we haven't worked with Adaptive on any tree planting projects. So that isn't something that's typically in their scope of work
Okay.
that we have them do.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions about provisions of this agreement?
No.
Okay, then I will make a substitute motion to approve the general services agreement with Adaptive Restoration LLC, subject to city attorney review and approval, amending the paragraph 3. We'll get there. Paragraph 3 under section 1 to include the Parks Director in addition to the city engineer. And amending paragraph or section 16 notices to replace the Public Works Office and the Parks and Recreation Office with the city administrator. Address and title. That's my substitute motion. Who would like to second that?
This is Jackson. I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the general services agreement with Adaptive Restoration, subject to city attorney review and approval, and amending section 1, paragraph 3 to include the Parks Director along with the city engineer for pre-qualification review, and amending section 16 notices to replace the Director of Public Works and the Director of Parks and Recreation with the city administrator, signify by saying aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Moving on to agreement number 2. This is the amendment number 4 to agreement with MSA for revisions to final design for Parmenter Street reconstruction. And this comes to us from the Public Works Committee.
Yep, on behalf of Public Works, Norman would that we approve this agreement.
Okay. Get a second?
This is Jackson. I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
None.
None? Okay. I see it's $360,000 for acquisition, land acquisition. Sean, can you tell us how many landowners that includes?
I don't remember that number right offhand, but I think it's in the ballpark of 16 or 17.
So it's not just the 2 who have been,
Correct. Yep.
all right, thank you. There are no further questions. Then all those in favor of approving amendment number 4 to agreement with MSA for revisions to final design for Parmenter Street reconstruction, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to number 3, agreement with Psyche Design to add construction administration services for Stone Horse Green. And this comes to us from the staff, and it's related to the resolution we just approved, the budget amendment.
Norman would like to make a motion that we approve this agreement with Seki Design.
Okay,
This is Jackson. I'll second.
thank you. Discussion.
As we discussed.
So Abby, this, we don't have the amendment, correct? Or we don't have the agreement, just the letter.
Yes, this is all we have. It's just written briefly as an amendment to the current agreement. There is a signature line. I don't know if this suffices or if we need to have a more formal amendment to the contract.
And if we need a more formal amendment, you could still go forward with the provider, Psyche Design would have the comfort level to go forward with the work, even if council hasn't approved an actual agreement.
I mean, you could approve it subject to the city attorney reviewing the form and approving the form of contract.
So then it wouldn't have to come to us.
Mhm.
Okay. Who would like to make that substitute motion?
Norman will make that substitute motion as stated.
So the substitute motion is to approve the agreement with Psyche Design to add construction administration services for Stone Horse Green. Brian, take it over. Subject to
To city attorney review and approval of the format and form of the contract or agreement.
format and form of the agreement. Okay, then we got a motion.
This is Jackson. I'll second.
Okay, all right. Substitute. Okay, so all those in favor of approving the substitute motion to approve the agreement Psyche Design to add construction administration services for Stone Horse Green, subject to city attorney review and approval of format and form of the agreement, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to our last agreement or contract. It's the First Amendment to Development Agreement between the City of Middleton and Greenway Project LLC. And this comes to us from city attorney and staff. Who would like to move approval?
This is Jackson. I'll move approval.
Thank you.
Norman will second.
Thank you. Discussion? Bill, would you like to provide a little?
Yeah, I can provide a little
Okay.
background on what this is and why it's coming before you now. So we have an approved development agreement with Greenway Project LLC for the redevelopment of the ponds site. That project had some delays with their commencement of the project. They are now looking at starting the work this fall with completion by spring of 2026. This amendment adjusts the timeline to reflect the updated construction timeline. Doesn't change the total dollar amount that they're eligible under the agreement or the interest rate on the TIF bond. But we included a couple of items in this amendment to help protect the city, given our nearing the end of the TIF expenditure period and the discussion about potentially closing TID 3 early. So this does define substantial completion. It allows for the project to be completed up through May 31st of 2026. However, because the TIF expenditure period ends in September of 2025, there's a requirement that they have to incur their TIF eligible expenses on the project and submitted them to the city for review by the end of August of 2025 to allow us to take action to approve the TIF bond within the expenditure period. It also includes a provision that we would not begin making payments on the TIF bond until after the project is completed. And there's some language added in here that allows for termination of the TIF district if the city either has paid the TIF bond in full or makes other arrangements to provide for the payments. And that could be creating an escrow of funds or prepaying the bond or some other solution that would allow us to set funds aside to be able to pay the remaining obligations and still move forward with the TID closure.
Okay, thank you for that background. Any questions for Bill? No? Okay. All those in favor of approving the First Amendment to Development Agreement between the City of Middleton and Greenway Project LLC signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Right, the ayes have it. Moving on to bids and quotes, we have two. The first one is the award of bid for senior center exterior doors to Mobile Glass.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the
The award of bid?
the award of bid.
Okay,
This is Jackson. I'll second.
thank you. Any discussion? Well, I have a question for Sean. Sorry, Sean. Sean, you should just always sit right by the podium.
This is
So,
my only hope of getting steps in.
oh, good. So as I may have mentioned, I play pinochle at the senior center every Friday at noon, in case anybody's interested in learning how to play. There are 3 external doors. So, but I noticed that the quote or the table shows it's just one door that's being replaced.
Oh,
Can we scroll down to see? Maybe it was just
One doors, one doors.
one doors. So I don't know if that was just one project, lumping, shorthand for one project. I was just curious.
I am not familiar enough with the details of it. I don't know if Jim is online or not. I think he might be at the council meeting if it needs to wait, but I suspect what I'm looking at is one lump sum.
Okay. Then I will ask him my doors question if he's there. Okay. Any other questions? All those in favor of approving the award of bid for senior center exterior doors to Mobile Glass signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, the ayes have it. The last item on our agenda is the award of bid for mock HVAC control to ADS Mechanical LLC.
Norman would like to make a motion, recommend the finance committee and common council award contract for the ADS mechanical in the sum of 65,848.
This is Jackson, I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? I had a general request, and that is, can you explain what this project is?
Well, that I can't do either,
Okay.
but I'm sure Jim can. The one thing that I would note is that this will need to include also authorization for Bill to transfer some funds from the glass door project into this project, because that one was,
Okay,
the glass doors was well below the budget, but this one exceeds the budget.
okay. Bill, can you bring this page up so we can get the numbers? So the balance of 5848. 5848 allocated from account 416, 5650, 800. Is that all we need to do? To what account?
You know, so I think this could be done just as a straight transfer of appropriated budget authority from the senior center doors project to the project for the mock HVAC controls and the amount of $5,848.
Mock HVAC controls.
And this is an aside, City Attorney Fleming and I've had some conversations about budget amendments and language, and I know there are concerns with the appropriation statute, but I'm hoping we can find something that would at least allow us to make transfers of amounts under $10,000 or whatever is reasonable without changing the overall appropriation within capital projects, because I think that would eliminate a lot of these type of issues.
That would be good. Okay, so I will make an amendment to the motion. So that in addition of awarding the bid, we will recommend authorizing the transfer of $5,848 from the senior center doors project to the mock HVAC controls project. Can I get a second?
Gorman will second that.
Thank you. Okay, so the amendment is to add and recommend authorization of the transfer of $5,848 from the senior center doors project to the mock HVAC controls project. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Going back to the main motion then, to, as amended, to award the award of bid for mock HVAC control to ADS Mechanical LLC in the amount of $65,848 and recommend authorization of the transfer of $5,848 from the senior center doors project to the mock HVAC controls project. Signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. We've reached the end of our agenda and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks. And just, I did pull up on this